Hey, before this video starts, I just want to say, please take everything I say here with a grain of salt. I'm not an artist, and I generally keep my mouth shut when it comes to matters of art stuff. And everyone I talk about in my videos are friends and people who are generally okay with me doing this. They've consented beforehand. So this video is going to be a huge dump of my thoughts and opinions, and if you're more into a video that's just me talking and less of the high-quality tech editing stuff, then this is the video for you. But please keep in mind that these are all just thoughts and opinions. None of it actually really matters. Now, the art that Tomi usually makes is very simplistic and likes to tackle themes of mental health, and most recently she has made a comic and animation tackling the struggles of survivor's guilt, and I can very clearly see the inspiration taken from Avocado 6's work. And despite this simplistic art style, I can still very easily read the emotion, and the art doesn't have a hard time communicating what it's, trying to tell me. Right now, these two are currently my favorite works from them, because I think they're prime examples of where her simplicity shines. The first one I like because this is just a demonstration of Tomi's technical skill, like she knows what she's doing. The shading, the shapes, the face, they all come together to just make this thing that's really pleasant to look at, even though I don't really understand what's going on in this. It's very pleasant to the eyes and well polished. The second one comes from a comic panel she did talking about survival's guilt. I really like this panel, and I really appreciate how you use detail to make the focus of the piece really stand out, and that focus being her blank reaction to seeing these jumbled, messy thoughts that she has tried to hide away in the corners of her mind come back out again to haunt her. However, with the rest of the comics and animation focused around your themes of mental health, most notably survivor's guilt, I feel like there's something that is left to be desired. The composition of the comic is great, but what made this specific panel so amazing isn't really being applied to the rest of the comic. I feel like there should be a sense of progression in the decline of this person's mental health as these thoughts go on over time. Right now, we just have them standing back to back, and they're not even being compared to each other, which I think is a huge missed opportunity because the premise of survivor's guilt is that you are comparing yourself to this person who you've watched die, or that is dead in the same instant that you have died in, and that's where most of the guilt comes from. I think there's a huge missed opportunity to communicate how much of a mess / fuck up she is compared to this guy who's in the afterlife. And I feel I should be able to know who this person was, or who these people are, what job they have, what his life was like, and how other people aside from the main character have been impacted by his death. And most importantly, I feel like that outside of the fact that this comic is about survivor's guilt, it should be communicated that this character is dead, or in the afterlife. I feel like there is an extreme lack of visual communication of how survivor's guilt has affected the main character, or how the main character views this person as someone who is infinitely more deserving of life than them. For example, main character imagining what second character would be doing with their life instead of them, or how much happier people would be if they were alive instead of them. Or even going as to other symptoms of depression, that being lack of appetite and other shit like that. Something I would recommend that you go and watch is Ruru's Suicide Show, because while that video is a 4-minute long mess of symbolism flying past you at the speed of sound, they are able to effectively communicate through said symbolism who Ruru is, how she views herself, how she views the world, how she feels the world views her, and how she glorifies her suicide to herself. And something I feel you should really start to experiment with in your art style is the use of color and dynamic shots and symbolism, visual storytelling, that will make things much easier to communicate what is going on inside these characters' minds, or what's going on inside their lives, or like the setting and context behind these characters that you can tell in either a very vague or very in-your-face kind of way. For example, the use of color. Like red symbolizes panic and like extreme emotion, and yellow can symbolize happiness, and blue calmness, purple like this royalty of this person is better than you. Not all the time, but sometimes. And you can do this in vague or like very in-your-face kind of way. And a vague way in my mind would look like, let's go back to the two comics of them staying next to each other. A vague way to describe this would be shadows coming down on the main character, showing how these thoughts are like putting a shadow on their life, or putting a slight yellowish glow on the side character to symbolize that they are in the afterlife, or putting a halo over them. With dynamic shots, something about Avocado 6's work that really fucking impacts me and really like gets to me is the way he pulls out the camera to show you what's going on around a character. Like in this image right here, where all the bleakness from the image is like comes from the surrounding environment of everything being closed down and whatnot. And then you get like this character who's sitting here playing with his Switch, and he has just this aura of comfort that clashes with the bleakness of his environment, and this wouldn't be possible if the camera hadn't zoomed out to show what's around him. And outside of all that, I think your art style is amazing. I think it's flexible, and there's literally nothing wrong with not using color in your art. I just think you should experiment with it and see where you can go with it. See where you can take it. I just think with right now, there is a lot you can experiment with in your current art style. Now, Tomi, with your animations, specifically this one from February 8th, I feel like there's a little bit of a consistency error. Now, I think it looks really great at the end of it, but the first bit, like, the size of the character kind of goes in and out, and then it just kind of grows really suddenly and rapidly. The growth at the end where, like, they go closer to this camera, that doesn't look bad, but I think the setup to it kind of makes it look a little bit off. It kind of affects it a little, because the size looks really weird. It's not something easy to do, and I think given what you've got, this was very well executed. It looks smooth as fuck. It's just something to keep in mind.
Hi, okay, this is post-recording Toasty here, and I just want to say, so right after I recorded, I checked my timeline, and I saw Tomi posted this, and I just want to say, yes, this is fucking awesome. This...
Oh my god, stop drawing squids for 1 fucking second! One thing I've noticed a lot about your art is the inconsistency of your signatures. Sometimes it'll be over here and look all colorful and fancy, and sometimes it'll be over there all sketched out in a pencil or whatever, and sometimes... Wait, is that fucking Times New Roman? Peaches, you disgust me. Most of the time, you'll just forget to do the signature altogether. And while this is a very minor critique, it's something I've noticed for a while and I felt like I just had to point out, even though it is a little bit strange. Now, Peaches is someone who I would consider to be a connoisseur of art styles. Like, this lady does all sorts of art styles all the time, but if I was to criticize anything, it would probably be on her animation side of her hobby. Now, overall, Peaches is a decent animator. What I'm looking at here is actually, I consider to be well drawn. However, the way it moves feels very unnatural, and it's a little bit too fast, because the tail, when it reaches the end of its cycle, it just completely stops, and the momentum completely goes into the other direction. And I think it's a very off-putting. I think that if you put 2 keyframes in to have the tail actually, like, shift its momentum to swing over to the other side, this would look a lot better, at least in my opinion. Lastly, this image. This looks awful, and there's such a huge problem here that is sticking out like a sore thumb to me, and I'm just gonna fix it real quick so you all can tell what I mean. Oh my god, that looks so much better. I think to me, the craziest part about Madlibbs' art and her art style is the fact that I can look at this and be like, something doesn't feel right here. But the more I look at it and the more I analyze the piece to figure out what exactly went wrong here, the more I actually start to appreciate what's been drawn here. I realize how technically skilled Madlibbs actually is, and like how much effort and actual fucking skill went into creating this piece, and it makes me realize, so what the hell went wrong? Because this doesn't look right. The way the pieces are put together in this big artistic puzzle makes it look not off, but like worse than what it should be. And I don't know if that's anything specific. I don't know if that's just the style in general. I don't know if to me, in my head, the way I rationalize it, so far at least, is that there's a lot of empty space, and that could just be my head. So you might want to take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But the way I would remedy your situation, because I've been in a call with you and we've talked about this before, you understand that this doesn't look right. But the way I imagine you remedying this situation is just practicing the shit out of so many different art styles and experimenting the fuck out of it. Something that I would personally do is I would like spend a day to focus on one specific thing and implementing that into your style. Like beards, mouths, arms, limbs, shading, experimenting with all that shit. That's how I can see you really growing in your art. Because the thing is, Libs, you're very skilled in the technical side of art. You know a lot about the technicality of art. You know how to shade shit well. You know how to do backgrounds. You know how anatomy works. It's just, I feel like you don't really stylize yourself. You don't establish your brand of art. And therefore, I feel like that makes your art feel very bland to me. Even though it shouldn't. Even though to me, there's so much skill hidden behind everything. And I'm not saying that everything you make is bland or unappealing. I actually really fucking love your stills that you made on YouTube. I think those really stand out. And the chibis you've made for me and Fuchsia and yourself, those are also really cool. I like how you did those. But your normal art comes off to me as bland. I feel like there's no exaggeration, there's no... In my head, it's like a cartoon style that doesn't use exaggeration. A cartoon trying to pretend to be realism. And it misses out on the true strength and the true beauty of a cartoon. And to me, I feel like that's the biggest problem I have with your art. Now, I've dug through this lady's DeviantArt all the way back until its creation, and I've seen some very interesting things, but probably the biggest thing I've noticed with Zina's art is the fact that as of recently, she doesn't really leave her comfort zone. And what I mean by that is all I've really seen her draw is character pose after pose after pose after pose after pose. And there's nothing inherently wrong or bad about that. She's clearly just drawing what she wants to draw, and power to her for that. It's just, outside of commissions and art that is 2 years old, I've never really seen her tackle things like complex backgrounds, complex characters, dynamic composition, or rarely even characters heavily interacting with each other. And examples of you doing things like this have become some of my favorite works from you, and I think it's a real shame you don't do more of it. Now, I'm not saying you've stopped growing as an artist, because from what I've seen, you've come a long way from where you were 2 to 3 years ago. And the years of experimenting with your art style has definitely paid off. What I'm saying is that your art is already incredibly fleshed out, and I don't think there's much more you can gain from fleshing it out even more. Your art is incredibly stylistically diverse, and you have a special way of giving a character or a scene a sort of aura or a strong vibe to it. And characterization is clearly your strong suit, but there's a lot more ways characterization can be used outside of characters. Because you can characterize buildings, books, computers, lamps, weaponry, all sorts of different shit. And I think there's a lot of unexplored potential here. Now, I'm going to move away from Zina, and I'm going to be talking about artists and creators as a whole. There's nothing wrong with having a comfort zone and staying in it. I mean, that's why it's called a comfort zone. It's a zone where you're comfortable, where you can easily enjoy yourself, and as long as you are aware, of the fact that you're in your comfort zone, and that most of your growth as a person or creator is going to come from leaving said comfort zone. Okay, listen, fuck it. We need to talk about how Zina draws her legs, because it's just...
Hey, so I heard you were talking shit about my art style.